Development hell is a term often used to describe video games that have been through absolute terror when it comes to their production cycle. But other times it just means that the game took a really long time to be made. And sometimes, yeah, that can be just hell, working on the same thing for years and years without end in sight, without any sort of hope that what you are working on will actually be finished one day, sort of like doing this show each week since 2008, the same show constantly. So this is the top 7 games stuck in development hell, or games whose development took forever, or games that took a long time to make. It depends on which title sounds better to YouTube. This is a show dedicated to those games that took a really long time to be made. And before you say, oh, I know what's gonna be first, no you don't. It's not going to be Unreal World. Yes, it's taken 26 years to get to where it is now, but Unreal World has been released several times. It's had a 1.0 version. It's had a sequel, a 2.0 version. It's had a 3.0 version. The base game was released a long time ago, and its continued development, yes, is an intriguing fact. But the point is, it was released in a final version, because if I were to put Unreal World in this show, I'd have to put NetHack here, and that thing's been in development since 1987. I'd have to put some mods here that have been in development since the 70s. So I'm reducing the focus to things that were being developed up until 1.0 for a very long time, or whatever 1.0 means nowadays for people that use early access and never really release a game. That being said, let's get it started with number 7, Too Human. Now officially this game took about 9 years to be developed, with it being announced for the PlayStation and then being ported to the GameCube and then being ported to pretty much every other platform until the final version came out on the Xbox 360 and also I believe the PS3. Now 9 years is a lot of time for a game to be in development. I mean, it's the same amount of time that Team Fortress 2 was in development. But Too Human actually goes a bit beyond this, because like I've said in the show about Blood Omen, Silicon Knights, Dennis Dyack especially, was tinkering around with the idea of Too Human since before Blood Omen. That's a lot more than 9 years. That's a lot more than 20 years in total. But again, that wasn't actual development. It was sort of a planning idea. I wouldn't even call it pre-production, but at least the idea was floating around there for more than Team Fortress 2 was. So that's why this is here and not Team Fortress 2. Speaking of which, number 6, Half-Life 3. You know that Valve is working on it. They've been developing it pretty much since Half-Life 2 Episode 2 ended. Actually even before it, because pre-production started on it a really long time ago. So you're looking at about 10 years plus of development. Again, I don't have an exact number because, well, it's still ongoing and Valve doesn't really say much. But we know they've been working on it. We know they've done a lot of work on it. Some of it has leaked. We've seen the artworks. We've seen some ideas of it. We've seen the RPG components of it. We've seen a bunch of it. We know that it's there. We know that it's coming. We just don't know exactly when. So I'm probably gonna update this show in 5 years when I'm still doing it every week because nothing else gets views. With Half-Life 3 being now at the 15-year mark and probably still not released yet. But there's still hope. I mean, they have Source 2, they have that SteamOS thing. They could sure use a game to use them both to the fullest. Just saying, Gabe, you know you wanna, and we really want you to know you wanna. Number 5, Final Fantasy 15. As I've said in the show about the most expensive games ever made, this thing took over a decade to be produced. Over a decade. I mean, they had screens for, well, not screens, but images, sort of gameplay, maybe CGI actually, now that I think about it. They had shots of this game since 2006. So they were actually kind of working on this since before it. I can't exactly say for how long, which is why I'm setting this to 10 plus years. Maybe it was just 1 year, maybe it was 2, so it's a bit nebulous, but again, this development cost more money than everyone I ever know will make in their lives, and their children will make, and their grandchildren, roughly around the value of the internal organs of everybody living in this town. That's kind of how much this game cost to make. Naturally, it did go through many iterations, becoming basically a different game. Well, parts of it became different, parts of it stayed the same, but it was still one cohesive project. Which is why I didn't put Prey here, because the old Prey, the 1995 Prey, although was remade as the 2006 Prey, they weren't the same project, they were different games, made by different people, with similar objectives but still different. Unlike number 4, Diablo 3. Since Diablo 2 finished production, this thing went into development since 2001, and the first version of it looked interesting. It was made as a direct continuation of Diablo 2. It had you going to heaven, which well, yeah, the new one does too, but it had more of a style that seemed similar to Diablo 2. You know, technology was different back then, isometrism was still something, and it sort of spent a couple of years in that shape, and then it didn't, and then took up a new shape, and then didn't, and then took up another shape, and then it became what we saw in the year 2008 or 2007, I forgot which, and then it continued to be developed over the course of the next 4 years, becoming progressively worse until it was released as an absolute disaster. It still sold 10 million copies in a couple of months, 20 million in a year, 30 million, I don't know, maybe it's at 40 million now, 50, 100. It's Diablo after all. People waited for over a decade. They waited for 11 years for it to be released. It could have been the War Z levels of horrible and still people would have bought it, though that doesn't actually make much sense because the War Z was a bestseller, so it could have been a technical disaster on par with Friday the 13th, and that's also a bestseller. And my god, people buy a lot of broken games and then complain that, oh my god, Ubisoft launches broken games. You keep buying them, that's why. Stop buying them, please. Also, Diablo 3 is bad in many ways, but it's Diablo 3. It's like saying that GTA 5, when you break it right down, is kind of a letdown compared to San Andreas, which was actually more ambitious in terms of what you could actually do in it, and gave you more options and actually had a story that was going somewhere, but people will still buy it because it's a goddamn GTA, and it's the new one, and it looks great. So yeah, Diablo 3 took a really long time to be made. It could have taken a bit longer had it not become super lazy near the end, and decided to revamp the skills into a line with no choices. Number 3, Dwarf Fortress. Now you may be saying, well, isn't this the same thing as Unreal World? Well, no, because Dwarf Fortress is still an alpha. It's never reached a 1.0 version. It's still in active development, still adding features that are going to be part of the 1.0 master plan. And they've been developing it for 14 years. Just 2 people, again, like Unreal World. And the thing is, they're gonna continue developing it for another 20 years. Yep, this is probably going to be the game with the longest time taken to get to version 1.0. It'll probably take 34 years. So I'm gonna do this show again in 2037, like I do every week. 9 years, technically 10 if you count where I just did a text for it. And I'm gonna say that, yeah, Dwarf Fortress is now number 1. I'm probably even gonna reference this show in 20 years. Most of my core audience will be dead by then, and so will my soul. Number 2, Duke Nukem Forever. Oh, Duke Nukem. This is the absolute poster child for games that went through development hell. It was supposed to be just a better 3D version of Duke Nukem 3D with actual 3D, you know, with geometry that actually worked in 3 dimensions, not in 2, so you didn't have anomalies. with extended gameplay, with more interaction, with Quake engine technology. And then, well, they switched to Unreal because it was newer, and I think at one point George Broussard saw that some game had a snow level and wanted to add one, and because Max Payne sold well, they had the money to keep on making Duke Nukem Forever, and they did, and they kept switching engines and redoing everything from the start, and well, eventually they went a bit bankruptish and got bought out. Well, the properties got bought out by Gearbox, who took a bunch of the devs and put them in a room and made them finish the game, and then cut part of it off and sold the DLC, and the game came out 15 years after it was announced, and it was bad. And it wasn't bad because, oh my god, this is a game from the 90s and it doesn't have any place in the modern gaming scene. No, this was just a sort of a reskin of Halo in terms of gameplay, but with even worse levels, which is funny because Master Chief's armor is made fun of in Duke Nukem Forever, even though they both have the exact same regeneration mechanic. This game truly went through hell. I mean, it looks like it came out from a fiery pit, from rivers of flame, from boiling oil cauldrons that look like it was just ravaged every day by demons with pitchforks. And you know, Gearbox still thinks it's the cat's meow because they're Gearbox. And the number one game stuck in development hell is Grimoire, Herald of the Winged Exemplars. A game made by one person, one Cleve Blackmore. It's been in development since he was let go from the development of a wizardry game a long time ago. About 20 years ago. 21 years actually. This game has been in development for 21 years. Actually over 21 years. It's been made by one single person for over 2 decades. And it was supposed to be released last week, but at the last moment, some more micro issues cropped up and the game is still not launched. Now, this game has a bit of a reputation for being vaporware, but a part of that, well, a lot of it, was alleviated by the fact that a couple of years ago, he released a demo version of it. A big demo version, a huge demo version that's got more gameplay than most RPGs have today. And the final version is going to be out probably this year. It was supposed to come out again last week, but since things happen, it's probably going to be delayed a bit. Hopefully not for an entire year. Now, Cleve is a bit eccentric, so maybe he will delay it for a bit more just to be safe and sure that the game is properly working, but he is quite adamant on releasing it after working on it pretty much alone for over 2 decades. And that would be it for the top 7 games that have been in development for a really long time. I'd like to give a special mention to My Game, whose development started in 2002 and then ended up turning into a book series. Volume 2 coming out this year, maybe, hopefully. I don't know, I should have had it done last year, but you know, things happened last year. So volume 2 maybe this year, maybe. Goodbye.